Welcome to the Life Leadership Podcast with myself, Leila Singh, all things coaching, career and personal branding. This podcast is for ambitious career professionals like you, wanting to create a life of choice and freedom, to be, do and have more through overcoming limitations, to develop new perspectives and insights, and to redefine your success, be that in work, health, relationships, and so much more. Today, I am speaking with Hena Naranbhai. Hena is a Director of Strategic Development and Chief of Staff for Women in Tech EMEA and Employee Resource Group. She has an extensive background in the financial services industry, both as an accountant and a technology program director. She is a We Are the City Rising Star winner and has been shortlisted for multiple awards in both technology and leadership. Hena is also passionate about paying it forward and frequently volunteers her time to mentor others through a number of social enterprises and charities, including Cajigo, TechUp, and as a UN Women UK delegate. In today's episode, Hena shares with us her career journey and learnings transitioning from a small pond to a large ocean. Why fear of the unknown is not a reason to hold ourselves back. How having courage, confidence, and being curious and open creates opportunities. Why asking for help is okay. How knowing that she had more to give took her on an unplanned journey of exploration. Why life is a journey of continuous learning. She also shares her passion for inspiring and being a role model for others to realize what is possible for them, and the importance of personal values and choosing your perspectives on life. So let's head over and hear what Hena has to say. Hena, hi there. Welcome to the Life Leadership Podcast. I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you today. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Leila. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm really, again, really excited about being here today, but also hopefully the audience really enjoy what I have to share as well.
Yeah, and I absolutely am certain that they will. I've been following you for a long time on LinkedIn. I just think, you're so accomplished. You're out there, you're sharing, you're showing what is possible for others. So I think there's a lot to be gained from this conversation for others today. So let's kick straight off. You've got a hugely successful career, no doubt. So I'd like you to share a little bit about your journey to where you are today, and maybe, begin by talking a little bit about your early career and okay, how you've gotten to where you are.
So let me start right at the beginning, and I think this is going to resonate with some of your audience who have come from a South Asian background. For others, it's going to be completely alien and won't be familiar. So my parents were migrants in the UK. They came from Africa. So my dad came from Kenya and my mum from Tanzania, which is surprising to some because I am South Asian. My grandparents are from India, but they actually came over from Africa in the 60s and 70s. And there wasn't any real pressure or expectation of me to have, a well-founded education or a professional job in any way sense of the fact. My mum worked in a factory as a seamstress and went on to work in a supermarket. My dad worked as an electrician in a local business that actually do the trains in the underground and the Eurostar. So it wasn't like there was an expectation that I would have this fabulous professional career as I grew up. I was educated here in the UK and born here in the UK. So I went through the sort of state school education here, and I just got on with things. That's what was expected of me. It wasn't, that I felt that I shone as a child. I just did what I thought my parents expected of me. And then I think when I got to my A-levels, there was this real realization that I was part of a family who hadn't had girls go to university. So my dad's one of six. He's the youngest. He's got 5 older sisters and he's the only son. So in Asian families and in cultures traditionally then, he was put on a pedestal and given lots of opportunities. Now, I was his eldest daughter, and I didn't have cousins or role models that had gone to university before me. I had one of my mum's younger sister actually did go to university, but my mum had quite a negative view of university at that point in time. So I did my A levels. I did maths, computing, business studies. I didn't do very well at some of those A levels. I came out with very minimal points and was really disheartened. I'd worked really hard and I couldn't understand why this was the case. I had two of my cousins sit me down and say, right, you got three choices, Hena. Choices are get a dead-end job. You're in a small town in the East Midlands. It's not frowned upon. That's one of your choices. Repeat your A levels. Maybe you'll do better the second time round. Which at that point just did not appeal to me. It felt so difficult to have got to this point and felt like I'd failed. Wasn't something I wanted to put myself through. Or just go to university with what you had. I could still go to university. It might not be, you know, the Oxfords and the Cambridge of the times, but who was to say no to De Montfort University, which was down the road from me, you know? So that's what I did. I went to university with what I had. I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point in time. I decided that the safe option was to do a degree in business studies, which should open up doors for me. And so that's what I did. I went to university, did a generic degree in business studies. As I was studying, a lecturer said to me, "You're really good at the more mathematical problem solving modules. Have you considered being an accountant? And by doing more of these modules, you'll get accreditation, so you'll have to sit less professional exams." And that, to me, was a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I explore that? So that's exactly what I did. I majored in finance and did my degree at De Montfort University in Leicester. I finished university, and the next challenge was finding a job. It was early 2000, 2001 at the time. Job market was reasonable, but still challenging, right? I didn't have a red brick university behind my name. So what did I do? I wrote to hundreds and hundreds of accountancy firms, locally, globally, nationally, and wasn't successful in that pursuit. But I found a role originally as a payroll clerk, and it was for a FTSE 100 company. So I was like, okay, I've got my foot in the door. Let's give this a go. And that's what I did. I started doing payroll, moved on internally as a accounts clerk at the time. They then paid for my professional qualification. So I stayed. I got to move around in what was a global FTSE 100 company in the construction industry in the East Midlands. And it felt like, wow, I'd actually accomplished something. Now, I stayed there for about 4 years and qualified as an accountant. Now, the challenge that I have, and many professions have this, is what happens once you're qualified? Can you actually be promoted to the profession that you've been working for? And what are the barriers that stop you from getting any further? And the biggest challenge was for me, A, there wasn't a role for me to go into, but secondly, and this happens and is quite popular and familiar today and was definitely present 20 years ago, there was a big salary gap between being a junior accountant and a professional qualified accountant. And so the options was to stay as I was, and that didn't really appeal to me. Why had I worked so hard for the last few years to get this professional qualification, or move? And it just coincided with getting married. So I relocated. My husband had this conversation around, well, whoever was on the greater salary when we got married would just go and live there. And at that point in time, he was on a greater salary. So I moved to Yorkshire. I moved up to Bradford to be with him and his family. And I had a bit of a challenge looking for a job. I did get interviewed with some great great organizations. And I finally found a job in financial services for a company called Bradford and Bingley. For those of you who remember pre-credit crisis, this is a small building society bank, known for its bowler hats. And it was amazing. I learned so much. It was such a small bank. I got to do everything from they were doing TV adverts when I first joined. So this was pre-credit crisis. So I was doing the marketing spend for that and being involved with the accounting for that. I joined the treasury team. I had a portfolio of assets within the treasury team. So asset-backed securities, PPNs, derivatives, everything that I was doing the accounting for that.
Yeah.
And then the credit crisis came along. Everything, all of a sudden, it felt like overnight went upside down. And what had happened, the government had basically sold the mortgage book for Bradford and Bingley, which meant that it had no assets. And that left me in a really peculiar situation, thinking, well, what does this mean for me in my career? I was in my late 20s at this point, and I didn't quite know what this meant. And so I continued to seek opportunities internally. So there was an opportunity, one of the ladies went on maternity leave and they needed a trader. So I actually went and sat on the trading desk and restructured principal protected notes. I did a lot of the restructuring to earn that for 9 months. And when that came to an end, it was this realization of, am I serious about my career? Do I enjoy being in financial services? What are the opportunities in Yorkshire? Well, unfortunately, Halifax wasn't in the best state at that point in time. There was Skipton Building Society down the road. Bank of England actually have a second site in Leeds. So these were options. Could I see a career beyond that, right? And my husband sat down and said, look, we've got no commitments here. Why don't we go to London? What have we got to lose? So we came to London, and I got my role that I did for many years at Barclays. I started out as a technical accountant. Did a huge mortgage project which led to a £90 million profit. I got involved with issuing of debt and asset-backed securities again, which was, familiar to me from my previous experience. So I got involved with things that had stopped happening because of the credit crisis, but was starting to happen again, sort of 2011, 2012. I also realized that I'd gone from a small pond to a massive ocean at this point in time. And although I had a really big corporate behind me, what did that mean for my career? So in my previous role, I was writing exco reports. I had a lot of visibility to senior leadership. In my role in this new corporate environment that had been quite an unstable banking sector at the time as well, opportunities felt fewer. And it was just the way the organization was structured at that point in time. I took a career break. I had my first child. And when I returned after my first child, I was quite determined. I had set myself to a point where I said, I'm not going to waste my talents. I've got more to give. And so I really challenged my line manager at the time. He kept coming back with different roles for me. And as many of you listening to this may know, that when you go off on maternity leave, there is an onus on the employer to provide a role, but not necessarily the same role you left. So I really said to him, come on, what else have you got to offer for me? And he came back with roles with Barclaycard, with wealth management at the time. And I was like, no, what else have you got? What else, what else is going on in finance at the time? And at the time, there was a big transformation program going on in finance, which had led to a lot of offshoring of roles from the UK and Singapore out to India. But it also meant that there was an opportunity to streamline processes. You'd had an organization that had been merged from Lehman's because of the credit crisis. You had an investment arm, you had a corporate arm of the organization, you had a wealth arm and a retail arm. And there were obvious synergies. We were all doing the same type of processes, but with different products at the front end, right?
Right. Yeah.
There was no technology involved, the program, but it was a real opportunity to look at the org structure. So I learned about target operating models, how to bring people together, how to organize teams and structures. It was a fantastic opportunity for me. I learned so much, and it gave me a sense of this is adding value, right? And eventually, this just led to a sort of stream of roles that came about after that. I mean, I'd been there for a number of years, and with different line managers, different sponsors I found, they gave me different opportunities. So I went from an accountant to working on projects as a business analyst, and all of a sudden I had to learn how to write requirements. And so I learned about different project methodologies. I learned about lean methodologies, which was just process engineering and looking at how that worked. And it was great because that knowledge went back to what I had learned in the construction environment. So there was synergies there. I was like, this is Japanese theory. This is how it should work. And this is how it can be applied. It allowed me to learn about waterfall projects and sort of how to structure pieces of work. How do you get funding for things? How do you and how do you gather requirements? And then as that sort of evolved, I learned about agile methodology. So I got to learn different things internally. And that came with promotions as well. So I went from being an AVP to a VP in a period of, I'd say, 2 years. You know, I grew in confidence in that time as well. So I was a business lead for regulatory projects, doing accounting projects. I led on the testing for group finance when we were doing structural reform, and that's when the UK banks had to separate from the investment part of the organisation. It's one of the biggest regulatory changes we've seen in the UK. And it was great. It was a real whirlwind moment. There were times in my career then where I felt like, gosh, I've been thrown in at the deep end. But my sponsors and mentors at the time were brilliant. They gave me opportunities. And these are the opportunities that I was seeking when I returned from maternity leave the first time. I wanted to grow. I wanted to feel uncomfortable. I felt I had more in me. Now,
So let's just stop you there for a minute. I mean, that there's so many things that are coming up for me as I'm listening to that journey. So I've just there's a couple of things I just want to touch on. So you mentioned just now about confidence and how your confidence grew.
Yeah.
So let's be real here. Let's go back a few years in the early stages. So for example, for me, listening to you thinking, like not thinking, but having that conversation with your husband, say, let's move to London. That's huge.
Yes, it is. And I think part of that was knowing I had more, but I couldn't. The organization that I was in and the circumstances of that organization, it wasn't growing. Yeah, there were circumstances beyond my control, the control of leadership there, that organization would never grow. I could never be more than what I was there. I could never get more money for what I was doing. I could take on the opportunities like I did. I went and worked on the desk. I didn't get paid like a trader, right? But it was, you know, in your 20s, how many people can say that? Okay, it was small. It was small, right? You know, I had my own Bloomberg screen. I had, you know, was able to price up bonds and reach out to brokers, etc., and do trades. But going from that really small environment, I kind of knew I wasn't going to get that in you know, in a Barclays, in a HSBC, in a UBS. I needed somebody who knew, because there is that network. So I just took that opportunity and said, okay, I've got that experience. I may draw on that in the future, but that just demonstrates I can do that, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I then went on to do a role when I moved to Barclays, a very, very technical accounting role. I'd never done it before. I just went with the view of, I'm a qualified accountant. I know that I don't need to know all my accounting standards inside out. I know they're available. I have technical accountants that I can go and talk to who have further expertise. I just ask questions, right? I had the confidence to go and ask questions or talk to people. I think that's probably one of my superpowers. I like talking to people. And I like to find out stuff. You know, there's so much stuff we don't know. And we're not meant to know everything, right? But
yeah, so let me just that for me, this is huge, right? And I'm sure you're familiar with this. There's a lot of people, particularly women, but there's a lot of people in the workplace across the board who will not want to ask for help because they feel they should know everything. I've had numerous conversations about people going into a new role and still feeling that they shouldn't be asking questions because they're expected to know. And that's simply not true, because as you just said, we can't know everything. And actually, there's nothing wrong at all about asking, because it shows you're curious, you want to learn. B, it removes any levels of arrogance that you know it all when you walk into a role. And C, it's starting to build relationships, and people typically love to help and support. So unless you're asking the same question like 20 times, then that becomes a bit of an issue. But other than that, actually going in and asking for help is something that I'm a huge advocate for, because so many people fear doing that. So that's one thing I want to highlight. The other, well, there's so many things here, but you shared a lot of goldness. I want to just bring some of that out because, curiosity comes to mind when I listen to you sharing. It's like you're open and you're curious. So opportunities have come up all along the way, and you've been open to exploring, to looking at, okay, what if this works? What if it goes well? As opposed to, oh, well, I can't do that because, and also not having experience, but still moving yourself forward and grabbing those opportunities. I think is a huge asset to have, because again, by the way, I love this because it's very similar to my journey of doing similar and saying exactly what you said there, is knowing I had more. To quote you, it's like, there's more, and it's not necessarily disliking what you're doing, but actually I know I'm capable of more. Let me go find out what that could be. And I think it's in some ways it's a very courageous approach, and I say that because so many people fear that. There's confidence in being able to do that, and it's curiosity, but it's also wanting to grow and to learn.
Don't get me wrong, Leila, I would say have been, particularly in my early years, quite a risk-averse person. I've always kind of tried to stay within what feels like boundaries of safety, or like a net of safety, not sort of push myself too far out my parapet. And that's been different at different stages of my life. So when I first came to London, yes, I was confident coming to London, but within a period of 12 months, that confidence had been eroded quite quickly, because I'd gone from this really small environment where everybody knew each other, you'd just go and talk to them in the office, to this corporate environment where you were told you can't go and talk to so-and-so because they were more senior. And I'm like, why? Nobody could explain to me, but that was the culture of the organization at that point in time. I mean, it's changed tremendously, but at that point in time, I was like, you are an AVP, they are an MD. You have to go and talk to your VP, who then talks to the director, then talks to but why? Why can't I just go and say, hello, my name's so-and-so. I've just joined recently. I'm working on this. Is there anything I can help you with? That's my personality. That's me, right? Not, oh God, that's so-and-so. I'm not allowed to talk to them. I've got to make sure that, that I'm perceived in a particular way. I didn't want that. I had that through my cultural pressures, right?
Yeah.
And how society perceives you as an Asian woman. I didn't want that in my professional persona. And I do have different personas for different people, right? But yeah.
And this is the thing I want you to slow down and actually really recognize that and it's so refreshing to listen to you talking about this, because it's, in my experience of talking to a lot of people, it's uncommon, right? And I'm sure you're familiar with this. It's often, well, if I can't tick all the boxes on the job spec, I'm not going to put myself forward. Or, I can't ask questions, so I won't ask questions because people might judge me on that. And all of those kinds of limitations that we put on ourselves that then keep us playing small as opposed to flourishing and accomplishing like you have.
Yeah, and I think society doesn't help though, Leila. I mean, I look at the recruitment market today, and I've reached out to certain organisations, I've reached out to certain groups of people that I want to be a part of, and they said, well, actually, you can't be a part of this because you don't have this credential. And I'm like, why does it matter? We have, through society, through our organisations, we've discriminated on so many different levels. And we want to be diverse, we want to be inclusive, and we want equity. So then why are you not then going, okay, we have this criteria today, however, we appreciate you want to be a part of this, let's help you to get there. That's more positive.
Yeah
Than just going, no, you're not good enough. Because that hearing of you're not good enough over time erodes your confidence. And I think that really impacts everybody, not just women, it impacts men as well, right? Impacts anyone that hears you're not good enough tremendously. And I speak from personal experience, and I think very cognizantly when I speak to my children as well. I want them to know that they are good enough. And if that means they're going to go and do something that perhaps is a little bit alien to me, I'm going to have to suck it up and get on with it, because that's their dream. Who am I to go and squash that, right?
Completely. Yeah.
I might be their mother, but I'm not going to live their lives for them. They're going to have to be independent. I can't follow every single move for the rest of their lives. At some point, I've got to let them free.
Yeah. Again, just coming back to your openness to grabbing opportunities.
Yes.
Like, again, I truly believe that does take courage. It takes strength to be able to do that, because the typical dialogue that people have is, oh, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I've never done that before. And it's almost like we forget that when we started our career, we didn't know so much. And then a few years in, it suddenly becomes, oh, well, I don't know enough, so I can't do this and I can't do that. And, I can't consider something like a slight shift in direction. And I love, you almost said like you've come full circle to some extent in terms of joining the dots of the experience you've had in your early years to what you were doing more recently.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly powerful to slow down to and notice, because joining the dots is incredible when you look back and see, in your case, how far you've come, what you've accomplished, and actually how you can still leverage what you learned in your early years to what you're doing today, for example.
So perhaps my mindset's shifted a little bit. So if I think about what my career looks like ahead of me, right? I've got more than 20 years, I think, yet to work. Unless I become a millionaire or something changes, I've got more than 20 years yet to work. What will my career look like in 20 years? Well, the honest answer is I don't know, right? I don't want to plan it to the T. There are things that I want to have in the next, next year, next 5 years. But I also know there are things around me, the environment around me, particularly with technology, that is changing so much. And it's an opportunity rather than fear what's happening, where that will take me, right? I want to be on that journey. I want to be part of that movement that goes forward, that that mindset, that revolution, that generation that kind of goes, well, actually, we've not done this before, but what about this? What about solving it like this? Okay, let's explore this. And why shouldn't we? We've got the opportunity to, and we could make such a difference to so many aspects of our life, right? Yes, there are barriers to some of this. I just think, you know, with all of the pressures we have on our lives, our well-beings, what's going on globally, we've got to think outside the box. The solutions we have work right now and are okay to keep, you know, us ticking over, but they're not going to sustain us for the future. I guess it's just my personal views on that at the moment, and I think this is where innovation and inspiration comes, right? It's still scary though.
Yeah, it is. So on that point, then tell me. So for people who are listening to you sharing this, who are, we use the word maybe fear, because you referenced that, in terms of, you know, the working landscape is changing. I mean, it's changed massively from when I first started, and I'm talking 30 odd years ago, right?
Yes.
So much has changed, and it's going to continue that way. It's probably going to get faster in the way that it changes because of technology. So what would you advocate to people who are like, but I'm fearing this and this is all I know? Because for me, it's coming from a mindset here that you have. So what is that you can share with someone who's like, yeah, I'm struggling to embrace this, and I'm now living in a place of fear of I don't want change, which is common.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are elements of myself where I go, oh, my gosh, I'm not ready for this. I'm not sure I can deal with this. From a simple things like being employed versus self-employed, or a consultant, or doing your own thing, right? It's the fear of the unknown more than anything, I think. And I think the key that I've found, and I continue to do this, is keep talking to people, right? This goes back to the sort of what I said. You're not meant to know everything when you join a job, right? Or do a new role. Go and find people, go to networks, and it's hard, right? It's scary going to meet new people, going to put yourself out there to say, hey, I need some help with this, or I don't understand how to do this. Could you help me?
And
worst that can happen.
With that, when you've done that, have you ever had someone just say no?
Yeah. And that's normal, right? Some people sometimes too busy. Some people don't want to share their knowledge, right? Because knowledge is value, right? I'm sitting here talking to you. What I'm sharing, I could monetize it, right? I haven't. I've chosen not to. But what's stopping me? But I'm a true believer in karma. What comes around goes around, and if I give, it will come back to me somehow. I don't know how. It will work its way out, right? And I've learned that as I've got older. I think it's wisdom as you become, and wiser as you become older. And I have kind of stepped back from the world and gone, okay. So the Western culture expects this, and the Eastern traditions and life has this, and this is how religion looks at it. How do I want to look at it? What do I value in this? And there's no right or wrong answer. And this applies to everybody listening as well. You know, we all come from different faiths. We all have different life experiences. It's understanding, what do we value? And unfortunately in life, sometimes hardship allows us to look at things differently, with different perspectives. And, you know, I have so much admiration for anybody that, you know, who is going through hardship at the moment, because, and that's in many different forms. Although it's horrible to be in that situation, if you can see beyond that, then that will take you to a much greater place. I'm getting really I've lost my words. But we're getting quite spiritual in that in our discussion, aren't we?
again, just circling back to that, you know, about perspectives and having perspective, I think that that's a really important point you've made, because it's very easy to just fall into what we are being fed. Now, whether that is from, we can go from anyone, from teachers, from parents, from the news, from social media, from, you know, organizations, and just buy into it and accept. And often a lot of that, particularly the latter ones that I mentioned, aren't necessarily for, like, they're not serving us, they're not benefiting us, they're not helping us, they're potentially putting us into a level of fear. And actually, if we're able to kind of rise above that, take a step back and, you know, ask the question that you said there, which is incredibly powerful: how do I want to look at this? What's my perspective on this? And take your own point of view. That
you have to, right?
It's incredible. You know, that's personal responsibility, as opposed to just accepting what we're being told and being fed.
We are always going to be fed, right? We see this all the time, right? We're experiencing it today. We've got election around the corner. If you feel deep down in your heart so strongly about something, you've got to do something about it, right? You can't, I mean, it could be really minor. It could be something like, I don't know, your bins aren't collected on a particular day, or it's too long for the council to take them away, or you know, you've got a bee in your bonnet about the environment. You know, if you're really passionate about something, it's really important you pursue that. We all have a calling, right? I still often say to my husband, I still haven't worked out what my calling is. That's why I keep doing lots of discovery stuff. And he keeps going, well, it's not quite paying the bills, but hey ho, you know, we'll get there. I keep saying we'll get there. I'm still going to work that one out. But if you feel strongly about something, what's stopping you? I guess it's for me, it's a personal bugbear to moan about something. If you're moaning about it, go and do something about it. Nobody's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
I've learned that, right? If you feel so strongly about something, go and find it. Where there's a will, there's a way, right? We say. So if you're not happy about something, whether that be your personal circumstances, your job, your home life, change it. And that could be really minor, as simple as having a quick conversation with somebody. Or it could be very, very radical and dramatic that you change locations. I don't know. But that's your personal choice. You've got those options.
And I think, again, it comes back to the personal responsibility that we're prepared to take. And it's a lot easier. This is human behavior. It's a lot easier to blame. It's a lot easier to sit back and blame the institution, the government, the weather, you know, the economy, and your manager and that company and all the rest of it, like everything outside of us that we have no control over, rather than taking that personal responsibility. So I think what I'm hearing here, and I'm absolutely a huge advocate for, is taking that personal responsibility. So what can I do here to influence this situation? If I'm not happy with it, what can I do? Rather than hoping that, well, either blaming or hoping something else is going to just change when we have no influence over that.
Exactly
that. So we're covering a lot of ground here. Let's there's so much to go here, and I'm conscious of time as well. I think talk to me about personal branding.
Personal branding. This is really, I want to say, a bit tricky and a bit unique to me, right? So when I say that, I have been very, very cognizant of what I've done, particularly with social media in the past 12 to 18 months. I really feel it's important to have role models. I've really struggled to kind of go, who's around me looks like me? Are there any CEOs that look like me, who may have similar experiences to me? There's only one that springs to mind that's really inspiring, right? Indira Nooyi, who is a former chief executive of PepsiCo. And she understands cultural ties, having that her circumstances were completely different, right? But for me, having children, and I have a daughter and a son, so it's important they have positive role models in women, and so they can see what good looks like or should look like, what their sort of aspirations could be. There's no ceiling, right, for them, and I've made that very clear to both of them. But also to be able to support one another, because although we talk about a lot of women in their careers and their professions, it's not just women that get themselves to those positions by themselves. They need their brothers, their fathers, their husbands, their partners, their colleagues to support them and open those doors for them when they're maybe being slammed shut, or when they can't seem to get their foot in the door, right? So for me, it's really, really important to kind of have that branding that kind of says, look, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. And what I believe in is that there should be more visibility of positive role models. It doesn't matter what their background is, what their experience is, what their ethnicity is, what their gender is, what their what anything is, right? This is somebody that has shown that you can do, and is prepared to pay it forward and prepared to support those behind them.
Yeah.
And I won a Rising Star Award last year, and my husband and my two children didn't actually come to the award ceremony, but because it was broadcasted, they actually watched it at home, and my husband recorded what the children were doing, you know, whilst I was on stage. And it is such a cherished moment. They got to see their mum receive an award for what I've done and continue to do. And that gives them inspiration. They went back to school and told their teachers and other children in their class. And what does that then lead to? It inspires them more. I've been into some of the schools locally to me, kind of talk about my award and talk about some of the things that I do. And it makes a difference, particularly where I live. I live in East London at the moment, and the children here are from that South Asian background. And to see other women that are successful, that have worked, you know, in Canary Wharf as a director, they kind of go, oh, it's possible, you know, and that is so liberating, and it's so warming to see, you know, young girls and boys to kind of go, we can do this, right? That's really rewarding, and it means that you're giving somebody hope.
Yeah.
Right. Just like a doctor does with medicine, right? You're kind of going in and saying, okay, so what makes you feel that you can't do this? Oh, my parents immigrated here. They don't have an education. They don't have it. Okay, so what do you need? And it's really important for teachers in these roles as well, because your teachers give you some of these opportunities as well. They make some of the decisions that then influence your future. I mean, I had that throughout my educational life. So I had a science teacher tell me that I couldn't sit the higher paper for science after doing my mock exam, said to me, I should have put you in for this. And I was like, why didn't you? You made that choice as a teacher to hold me back, right? My parents didn't know any better to fight him. Why would they? But there are adults and people around us right from a very, very young age that influence the decisions and the opportunities we get. And I think teachers and other adults in privileged roles that influence children and beyond, and because that goes beyond into your career as well. So you have senior leadership that then influence the opportunities you have. You should be really cognizant about it.
Yeah. It's a big responsibility that those people have. Yeah.
It's a massive responsibility. And I have lots of friends who are teachers, and I have the utmost respect for teachers, but the responsibility you have, even for children that perhaps are challenging in the classroom, there's usually a reason, right? We've realized this over time. There's usually a reason that they are challenging in the classroom. And I get the fact that they don't have the funding to be able to support that, because it could be challenges in their home life, right? And
Yeah.
we're hearing more and more about some of the mental challenges that children have as well. And the resources aren't there to support that. But it's a vicious circle, right? You allow it to perpetuate and get worse. Or you kind of go, right, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to give this person a chance. And that's what most people are looking for, just that chance. Somebody take a chance.
Yeah. So for you then, personal branding is very much what I'm hearing about, inspiring the next generation. It's about showing others what is possible, being a role model for people.
Yeah, because I don't feel like there's lots of people like me out there, right? And I know a lot of people say, well, if there isn't anybody out there like you, well, create that. And it's really hard to do, right? Create a role model that doesn't exist. But it's so much easier to go, right, actually, they're brilliant. I really want to replicate what they've done. Well, no. How do you do that when there isn't somebody? So you've just got to be your authentic self. This is who I am. I'm not going to try and fit a mold. I've tried to do that for the past early 20, 30 years of my life. I'm not going to be for everybody, and that's fine. I've accepted that. Okay. But if you want help, if you want role models, if you want support, if you just want to chat, I'm happy to do that. Okay. It may not lead to something. It might be, okay, half an hour. Okay, that wasn't the best half an hour of my time, but that's fine. And it's both ways.
Yeah, completely that. So tell me, what is next for you?
What is next for me? I keep saying to my husband, I'm discovering, but that's, you know what, life's a journey, and I'm going to continue to learn. That is a mantra that I'm going to carry on with. I still want to learn, so that's what I'm going to do. Next for me, I want to get back to work. I love program managing. I love problem solving. I love talking to people. So that for me feels natural. Other things that I want to do, I've started doing more speaker events and conferences. That I want to share what I've experienced so far.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. It's not for everybody, and that's fine. And I'm accepting that, there may be people in the audience that go, don't agree with her, or I don't have the same experiences. And that's okay, because not everybody has the same experiences or the same opportunities in life. We're all different. And if we're looking for that blend of diversity across our organizations and across and we see it across the nation, right? There's a blend of people that live here in the UK. We all have different values. We all have different things that we contribute to society. And that's all part of it. So getting back to work, speaking more, maybe exploring and facilitating workshops, because I like that. That's familiar to me. That's what I've done a lot of, Would I do other things, crazy things? Yeah, of course. Somebody said to me, would you ever do a radio show or something? Maybe, if the opportunity came along. I guess, what's the harm? I've stopped myself from doing things in my early years purely because I've been afraid. And yes, it'll probably put me outside my comfort zone, but why not? What if I can help somebody by sharing, just one piece of advice, something that will kind of go, actually, I can do this, then I've done and accomplished what I wanted to do. I wanted to give somebody that positive hope that they could do. And what medium that is, it doesn't matter.
Well, I'm going to say this. I think you've done a splendid job of doing that in this conversation. I'd like to think, for anyone who's listening to this, that it will really open their eyes and their minds to what is possible when you are curious, when you're open, when you build that confidence, and have the courage to, as you say, step out of that comfort zone and actually explore what the world has to offer. Because that's when, and I honestly believe this is when we realize what we're truly capable of. Otherwise, we play a small game, we stay comfortable, and we never know what is out there.
And I think the thing for me, and we've touched upon this earlier, is there's something inside of me that says there's more. I don't know what that more is, which is why I, particularly in the last few years, I've been, okay, so what have you got to offer? Let's have this conversation. Might lead to something, it may lead to nothing, but that's fine.
Yeah. And that resonates so much because I've been in that space multiple times, whether it was leaving accountancy, going into recruitment, joining what's now Hewlett Packard Enterprise, going into corporate treasury, going into sales, etc. All of that. And even now, obviously leaving to then become a coach, right? It's like, it was always, there's more. I want more. It wasn't necessarily a strategic decision that I analyzed and did the pros and cons, because if I had done that each time, I probably would still be working as an accountant, because that would have been a logical thing to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But actually, like you, I think it's important to leverage what we do have and take that and see, okay, what more is there that I can now learn? What, you know, how can I grow? And how can I flourish? And you're a fantastic example of that.
Thank
you.
So
I'm sure you will inspire a lot of people who take time to listen and to watch this. Hena, I want to say a huge thank you to you for being so open and sharing with me today your journey, and you know, it's just some of the challenges you face as well, and like where you're at right now.
Thank you for the opportunity. No, really hope that your listeners have got some value out of today.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly have. So if I have, I'm sure listeners will too as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already done so. And if you enjoyed and gained value from today's episode, then do please leave a review telling us your key learnings and what you enjoyed the most. And do please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can spread the word on life leadership, creating a life of choice, freedom, and new possibilities. Connect with me directly on LinkedIn, and if you would like to learn more about how we can work together, either DM me on LinkedIn or email me. All details and resources can be found in the show notes.